When Abigail Foster told the town winter would arrive a month early, people laughed so hard they nearly spilled their coffee. The sky was clear. The afternoons were still warm. Cottonwoods along the creek hadn't even finished turning yellow. Old rancher Ben Harris shook his head. "You've been spending too much time in those mountains." Abigail smiled politely. "Maybe, but the mountains are trying to tell us something." That only made people laugh harder. Abigail wasn't a fortune teller. She didn't believe in signs or superstition. She believed in paying attention. Her father had trapped and hunted through the Rockies for 30 years. He taught her that nature always whispered before it shouted. Most people simply never listened. That September, everything looked wrong. Mountain bluebirds migrated nearly 2 weeks earlier than usual. Aspen leaves turned pale before neighboring valleys. Marmots disappeared into their burrows, while summer flowers still bloomed. Most unusual of all, the pika colonies above the tree line carried grass continuously from sunrise until dusk, far more than normal. Her father had once pointed toward busy pikas and said quietly, "If they're working that hard, you should be too." Abigail climbed the western ridge every morning. Each day, she noticed more changes. Cold winds lingered before dawn. Thin ice formed briefly on shaded puddles. Clouds built differently around the highest peaks. She filled page after page inside her notebook. Every observation pointed toward one conclusion: an early winter, a bad one. She returned to Willow Ridge and visited every ranch she could. Bring your livestock down early. Harvest now. Split extra firewood. Most people thanked her kindly. Few believed her. The town blacksmith laughed. "If winter comes next week, I'll shoe your horse for free." The general store owner grinned. "You've got another month." Abigail looked toward the mountains. "I don't think we do." Only one person listened carefully. Old widow Martha Ellis. "I've lived here 50 years. She folded her arms. "And I've never seen the birds leave this early." Abigail nodded. "Neither have I." Martha quietly doubled her firewood. Everyone else continued preparing at the usual pace. Abigail made a different decision. Several miles north stood a limestone cave she had discovered years earlier while searching for medicinal plants. Most people didn't know it existed. The entrance hid behind thick juniper bushes halfway up a rocky slope. Inside, the cave stretched nearly 80 feet. Dry, sheltered, naturally warmer than the outside air. Not warm enough to live comfortably, but far warmer than a tent during winter. Years earlier, Abigail and her father had improved it slightly. They built a small stone fireplace near the entrance, stacked flat rocks into simple shelves, created a smoke vent where natural cracks reached the surface. After his death, Abigail occasionally visited to remember him. Now she returned for another reason: preparation. Every afternoon, she carried supplies into the cave: blankets, firewood, dried beans, flour, salted venison, candles, lantern oil, a small barrel of fresh water. She even stored extra wool clothing inside tightly sealed wooden chests. Passing hunters occasionally noticed her climbing the mountain. Rumors spread quickly. "She's moving into a cave." Poor girl finally lost her senses. "Guess she's hiding from winter." Children laughed whenever she crossed town pulling another sled of supplies. Abigail ignored every word. The cave slowly transformed. She hung thick wool blankets across narrow passages to create smaller rooms that trapped heat. Built raised wooden sleeping platforms above the cold stone floor. Sealed tiny drafts with clay gathered from the creek. Each improvement made the shelter more comfortable. One afternoon, while clearing loose rocks deeper inside the cave, her shovel struck something unusual. Not stone, wood. Curious, she uncovered the corner of an old timber hatch buried beneath decades of dirt. It lifted surprisingly easily. Below lay a narrow stone staircase. Lantern raised high. Abigail descended carefully. The steps ended inside another chamber. Smaller, perfectly dry. Shelves carved directly into limestone lined every wall. Old clay jars still rested there. Several remained sealed. She opened one carefully. Perfectly preserved salt. Another contained dried beans turned to dust after decades. Near the back rested a weathered cedar chest. Inside she discovered journals, maps, mining records. The first journal belonged to a miner named Elias Mercer. Nearly 60 years earlier, he had converted the lower chamber into an emergency shelter while exploring nearby silver deposits. One entry immediately caught Abigail's attention. "The cave never freezes." She continued reading. Elias carefully recorded temperatures throughout several winters. No matter how cold the blizzards became outside, the lower chamber remained remarkably stable. Cool, dry, protected from the wind. Another page described a natural underground spring deeper within the cave. Abigail followed his rough map. After several minutes, she heard it. Water. A slow, steady trickle echoed through the darkness. She smiled. Fresh water. Without leaving the cave, she spent the next several days cleaning the forgotten lower chamber. The old shelves remained sturdy. She repaired broken storage boxes, collected more supplies. The hidden room nearly doubled the cave's usefulness. Back in town, life continued normally. Children played outside. Farmers delayed harvesting. Merchants waited for better prices. Only Martha Ellis finished preparing. Late one October afternoon, Abigail climbed the western ridge one final time. She stared toward the distant mountains. A solid wall of dark clouds rose beyond the peaks. Not unusually large, unusually low. The wind suddenly shifted north. Sharp, cold. A flock of geese flying south broke formation as powerful gusts caught them. Abigail didn't wait. She ran. By sunset she reached town. Harvest tonight. Bring your animals in. The storm is here. The mayor looked at the clear western sky. There isn't a snowflake. Not yet. He smiled patiently. We'll be fine. Abigail looked toward the mountains one last time, then quietly turned away. She loaded the last of her supplies onto a mule, climbed toward the hidden cave, and sealed the heavy timber door she had built across its entrance. Before dawn, the temperature dropped nearly 30 degrees. By sunrise, the first snow had already buried the mountain trails. The blizzard had arrived 3 weeks earlier than anyone believed possible. By noon, Willow Ridge had vanished beneath white. Snow fell sideways. The wind screamed through the valley hard enough to snap fence rails and uproot young pines. No wagon could move. No horse could keep its footing. Inside her cave, Abigail quietly fed another log into the stone fireplace. The lower chamber remained astonishingly steady. The thick limestone trapped warmth. The wool blankets divided the cave into smaller spaces that held heat even longer. She filled buckets from the underground spring. Everything she needed surrounded her. Then she heard it. Faint, almost buried beneath the wind. Someone shouting. Abigail hurried outside. 3 men struggled through waist-deep snow. Ben Harris was among them. His face had lost every trace of the confidence he carried only yesterday. The town needs help. Abigail didn't waste time asking questions. What happened? The storm trapped everyone. The road disappeared. The school roof collapsed. The church stove went out. Our firewood's almost gone. He hesitated before saying the hardest words. You were right. Abigail looked toward the cave entrance. How many people? We don't know yet. She nodded once. Bring everyone you can. Ben stared. Here. Now. He hurried back into the storm. By nightfall, the first families reached the mountain. Children rode on sleds. Older people leaned against makeshift walking pools. Parents carried blankets wrapped around babies. The climb exhausted everyone. Abigail met each group with lanterns placed along the trail. Inside the cave, she had already prepared. The lower chamber became the sleeping area for children and the elderly. The upper chamber remained the kitchen and gathering room. Blankets hanging between sections created warm pockets that trapped heat. The underground spring supplied fresh water without anyone stepping into the blizzard. No one had imagined such a place existed. One frightened little boy whispered to his mother, "It feels like another world." Abigail smiled. It almost is. By the second day, more survivors arrived. Then more. Nearly 40 people crowded inside the cave. Food became everyone's greatest concern. Abigail opened the cedar chest Elias Mercer had left behind. Beneath the journals, she had overlooked one final compartment. Inside rested neatly folded mats. One showed narrow game trails protected from heavy drifting snow. Another marked winterberry patches growing beneath rocky overhangs. The final map identified forgotten storage caches left by miners decades earlier. Abigail gathered for experienced hunters. We're not searching blindly. She spread the map across a flat stone. The mountain already knows where food is. Using Elias's notes, the men returned before nightfall carrying dried venison from one abandoned cache and rabbits caught along protected trails. It wasn't a feast, but everyone ate. On the 4th day, another problem appeared. Smoke from dozens of cooking fires would eventually fill the cave. Abigail remembered something from Elias's journal. She searched the lower chamber again. Behind one shelf, she discovered a narrow stone passage leading upward. Cold air flowed steadily through it. The forgotten miner had carved a second ventilation shaft decades earlier. After clearing fallen rocks, smoke escaped naturally once again. The cave seemed designed to solve every problem before it became dangerous. On the 6th day, a frightened young girl began crying. "I want to go home." Abigail knelt beside her. "So do I. But home is wherever the people who love you are." The little girl slowly stopped crying. Soon other children gathered around Abigail every evening. She taught them how to identify animal tracks from old sketches, how birds warned of changing weather, how plants survived winter. Fear slowly gave way to curiosity. The blizzard continued for 9 relentless days. When silence finally replaced the wind, nobody rushed outside. Abigail climbed the trail first. The valley below looked almost unrecognizable. Entire barns had vanished beneath snow. Fences disappeared completely. Several cabins showed only their chimneys. Without the cave, many families would never have survived. Rescue teams from neighboring settlements arrived 2 days later. They couldn't believe nearly 40 people had endured the storm inside the mountain. When they entered the cave, they expected little more than a hollow opening. Instead, they found organized sleeping platforms, food storage, a dependable spring, proper ventilation, even shelves lined with carefully rationed supplies. One county surveyor examined the lower chamber closely. This shelter wasn't luck. Abigail shook her head. It was preparation. After the snow melted, the town gathered in front of the rebuilt schoolhouse. The mayor stood quietly before the crowd. I laughed when Abigail warned us. He looked toward her. So did most of us. He paused. Our families are alive because she prepared anyway. No one argued. Ben Harris stepped forward carrying a weathered wooden sign. He had carved the words himself. Foster Cave, Community Storm Shelter. Abigail accepted it with a smile. "I'll put it near the entrance." Summer brought rebuilding instead of regret. The townspeople widened the trail to the cave. They reinforced the entrance with stone, added more storage shelves, built additional sleeping platforms. Every autumn afterward, families quietly carried fresh blankets, dried food, candles, and firewood into the shelter. No one complained. No one laughed. Several years later, travelers often asked why Willow Ridge always seemed better prepared than neighboring towns. The oldest settlers gave the same answer. Because one woman listened to the mountains before she listened to people. Abigail never claimed she predicted the storm. She simply noticed what nature had been saying all along. The birds had known. The pikas had known. The wind had known. She had only paid attention. People remembered the great early blizzard for the snow it brought. Abigail remembered it for something else. It proved that wisdom isn't convincing everyone you're right. Sometimes it's quietly preparing anyway, and leaving the door open when everyone else finally comes knocking.